brief remarks in speaking to this particular report.
The member for Holt just needs to seek
leave. If I can seek leave, Deputy Speaker, to make some
leave granted. Leave granted.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker, I've sat on this the committee, the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security now for some number of years. This has been, I recall and note that that Hizballah, the Hizballah external security organisation wing, was prescribed originally in 2003. There have since been 6 relistings which have required, under the sort of statute, for our committee to examine the listing and to make recommendations. As I've sat as a member of the committee on 5 of the considerations of those relistings for some period of time. I recall when we first looked at this in 2005 that, and subsequently, that this distinction between the external security organisation and Hizballah more generally seemed to be very artificial. And I think that, as has been demonstrated, and that my concern certainly wasn't ameliorated over the considerations of each relisting. I think it's very important, particularly in the Five Eyes, to note that we were the only Five Eyes partner that didn't list the military wing or Hizballah in its entirety in terms of a terrorist organisation, and I don't think that benefited Australia or Australia's national interest in that occurring. I also wanted to raise a concern about the fact that in 2018, when the bipartisan committee came to a conclusion and recommended to the government that in the re-prescription process, prescription process, that it would contemplate listing the military wing, that we didn't get a response to that, the 2018 report, and that's concerning. The government relies on this committee a very great deal. When I speak to interlocutors on sister committees in the United Kingdom, United States and elsewhere, they talk about the great work that this committee has done. For example, when we passed the foreign interference laws, those laws that were passed only due to the very diligent work of the committee, the other organisations and jurisdictions like the United Kingdom looked at what we've done, our work, very closely. So my point to the government is that, particularly when we are recommending something of this substance and this weight, that the government gives appropriate consideration to this recommendation and reports back to the committee. I think that's very important. The other thing to stipulate here is that these committees, for those that might feel, particularly in the Lebanese Shia population, that they've been singled out, that is not the case. What we are looking at, the committee itself, and I speak for the committee, that were many, many, many hours of deliberation. We stand here and we present the report, but there was, as the member for Isaacs and the Shadow Attorney General is sitting here listening to my contribution would acknowledge, many hours of consideration are given to listings of this nature. Consideration is absolutely given to those that might be impacted by these recommendations. These recommendations made by the committee are never made lightly, and they take every factor into concern, every factor into consideration, as we've done when we've listed the PKK. So I wanted to give that reassurance that this is something that the committee has given great consideration to, has not done lightly, but inevitably have come to a conclusion that that fig leaf of an external security organisation not being inextricably linked to Hizballah is just a fiction. It can't be maintained. And I would also say, particularly with respect to Sajid Javid, who, as the member for Barara pointed out in his tweet, I think it was today, mentioned again that this report is right. The political wing of Hizballah is a false distinction, as is recognised by United Kingdom, US, Canada, Germany and others, including the Arab League and the Gulf Cooperation Council. I think there's an important point here. Australia are great allies on counter-terrorism, so I'm sure the Morrison government will consider this carefully. So in closing, I would urge the government to consider this recommendation carefully. Our fight against those that would cause us harm is enduring, but we fight collectively, along with our Five Eyes partners. I think, in terms of this recommendation, that it sinks us in with the rest of the Five Eyes community and our struggle as countries and democracies have shared value and principles, that this is another tool, and as I said, sinks us in that global fight against terrorism and the damage that those that propagate terrorism seek to do to democracies. This recommendation, Deputy Speaker, is in the national interest. I just wanted to close by commending the members of our committee. It is not an easy thing to come to a conclusion in a lot of circumstances on a unanimous bipartisan report and a recommendation that's not an easy recommendation. That's been done in this case. I wanted to pay tribute to the chair, James Patterson, Senator James Patterson, and also to my friend and colleague, the member for Isaacs and the Shadow Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus. His tireless work for us on this committee adds to our committee, makes the committee a better committee, and I certainly thank him for his excellent work on this particular recommendation. I commend this report to the House, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the member for Holt. The clerk.
Government business. Order of the day number 1.